I think one message that's come out today in this panel as well as yesterday repeatedly is that DPIs is not a term that's sort of, uniformly recognized. And if I take my own country, if I say DPI, they will not recognize what is DPI. We are still looking at technology, digital infrastructure in a very narrow, through a very narrow lens of looking at the unique identity, and that is our key focus. So from that perspective, I think, it is not so much a north-south divide as more a case of we have not even considered what is happening in the north. We're still trying to catch up with what is happening in the region, and especially India having taken the lead. I think we've been fortunate to have sort of access to some of the positive news on that front and try and replicate some of those in our own countries. So that's the first point. And in that context, to me, if we try to sort of look at this in a more global agenda, I think one of the key issues is financing. Again, I think this was mentioned, the word public in DPI is in some sense, it's not problematic, but it's governments are supposed to take the lead on this. But the private sector is equally important in building up on the infrastructure and delivering. Governments are cash straps in the South. Now, the incentive structures are very different. The private sector is going to be looking at ensuring that they have some economic returns, financial returns. They will want to monetize whatever data they collect. They may prioritize products that will meet those business models rather than government priorities of trying to deploy something that is of more of a public good. So in that context, I think countries in the South, and I'm not putting India into that category, but other countries like mine, we are struggling to find financing. And what was mentioned earlier is that we know there are countries out there that are willing to help, not only with the financing, but also with the technical assistance, capacity building, and all the rest of it. So Sri Lanka is a prime example of a country that approached India, asked for its assistance, and India has given that, that help. So we are in the process of deploying the unique identity system. Bids were called, but there is a problem. The moment the Indian grant came, and there was a condition in that the suppliers have to be Indian companies, the concerns on the Sri Lankan front was we are having problem dealing with trust issues with our governments. We have tried to roll out privacy laws, but of course our privacy laws are way behind because we are still not thinking of DPIs as a larger infrastructure ecosystem. So, this is work in progress. Now, if we have a problem with trusting our own governments, now what happens if an Indian company is collecting our data? Where is it being stored? Who is responsible? Is there a cross-border, agreement on this? And does our privacy laws account for these new developments? So I think these are problems that India will also, as it takes on the mantle of trying to sort of scale up its engagement on DPIs through the G20 and beyond, will have to kind of, not just India, but all of the other partners about the financing, because in some sense the financing is also related to a key concern of data privacy as well at the end of it. The second, I think, important issue is again on sovereignty of the information. We are, that's where the geopolitics of it also comes. We have still not understood clearly what is it that different leaders in technology are offering the lesser advanced southern countries who are still grappling to understand what is it that the US is offering, freer flow of data, what is China offering, because some of it is being offered through the BRI initiatives, is more sort of controlled data flow. The EU has, I think, puts individual rights, and India, third way of more sort of, data sovereignty. So I think the discourse on North-South, there's a lot more catching up to do for us. That before we consider this to be a North-South issue, it is more a case of us trying to catch up with our peers in the South itself, and how to build up those relationships and then scale up thereafter.